Hi, Kirsten.
I'm muted. I said, I'll try again. Hi, good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Do you have a nice long weekend?
Yeah, we celebrated my wife's birthday, so we actually had a weekend of celebration. So it was really great.
Oh, that's fun. Happy birthday to
Yeah,
her.
yeah. I won't say how many years. I get
I
in
wasn't
trouble.
going to ask.
Okay, I have it that it's 9 o'clock, and so I'm going to call to order the Oregon Educators Benefit Board Strategies on Evidence and Outcomes Work Group, Tuesday, September 5th, 2023, and we're meeting virtually. Um, so I'm looking, I see Robert, and Jeff Brown is not the other one of the other members is not going to join us this morning. He is going to be able to participate in this afternoon's board meeting, but not this morning. Um, and I'm looking to see whether or not Bill Gropp has joined the group.
I'm here.
Bill, you're there. Great. Okay. So three of the four members are there, and we also have Greg Krauser from the PEB board has joined us. And welcome and thank you for participating, Greg. Uh, and of course, we have all of the OHA and Mercer team ready to join in our activity. So the first order of business is to approve the June meeting synopsis that you all received in your packet. Any corrections or comments? Otherwise, I'll accept a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
Second.
All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 Okay, great. So that's approved. The next issue is just one to acknowledge and something that we're definitely going to be needing to work on, and that is SEOW membership. Next month is Jeff's last OEB meeting, and so he no longer will be and we're not going and SEOW is not meeting next month in October. So Jeff will be leaving the SEOW group. Essentially, his last meeting was last year or in June. And Bill, my understanding is that you're with us for this year, or at least through June, and then you'll be off the board. And I am finishing my 8th year on the board, and I am at the end of this coming school year be heading off into the sunset. So Robert, you looks like you will be the one um, remaining SEOW membership. So your responsibility is to carry all of the history of SEOW forward. We will be looking to bring on additional members this year, so that you don't have to be the sole bearer of kind of the from the board standpoint the history of SEOW. So, but that's a big challenge that we have, and I want to put it out there now, just so that we all kind of know the challenges that we're going to be having for this year. Okay, so onward. We now are going to spend the next about 35 minutes talking about our wellness programs, and our Mercer consultants will lead us through that. So Kirsten, I think you're going to take the lead, and then you'll bring in others such as Dr. Chuang. Welcome,
Hi,
Ian.
Tom. Yeah, hi, Tom. That's right. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you again. We are just going to start with maybe a little level set just for everybody who, we're seeing you for the first time today and maybe weren't part of our summer work groups over the summer. And so we'll just talk a little bit about the way we're thinking about these clinical programs. There are wellness programs that we're going to talk about today, and then also some care coordination programs towards the end of the morning. And we do have John Kessler's here today. Also, Christy Ewing, our health coaching expert, is here today. And of course, Dr. Chuang is here as well to share his clinical perspective. Rose, if you go forward one slide. So our agenda for today is really just, again, to level set on the relationship between SEOW and the board, and not so much what it is, we know that, but really how our evolved thinking of SEOW, how that's all transpired over the summer, and how we're looking at serving the board and helping the board meet its goals this coming school year. John Kessler is going to dive into the two wellness programs with MODA and Kaiser Permanente. We're going to look at health coaching, which is also offered by MODA and Kaiser Permanente. We're going to take a look at the diabetes prevention programs now that those have been in place since 10/1/22. What have we learned so far? And then we'll look at some care coordination programs that MODA has in place. Behavioral Health 360 is one, and then PCP 360 and MODA 360, their CCM program, that's going to come next. All right, Rose, next slide. And thank you so much. So I know we know this, right? We have the OEB board, and the OEB board, we set goals last December, and we're going to refresh them, revisit them again in the retreat coming up here in October. And then the SEOW committee serves the board by providing clinical oversight and clinical strategy. But what we're really going to focus on today, and we'll touch on this again throughout the school year, is how SEOW does that. And what we're going to notice today is that we can have these lofty goals about providing clinical oversight and setting clinical strategy. But when it comes to oversight and accountability, we do that with really concrete steps. For example, we agree on clear outcomes. Like, what are all of these programs that we're putting in place supposed to do? What is success for each of these programs? And once we get clear and we get alignment on what's success, then we can start to think about what can we measure along the way that's going to tell us if we're being successful or not. And something that we'll see today is it really depends where in the member journey we're looking. Are we looking pre-enrollment when we're educating and finding members and connecting them with the right program? Are we looking immediately after they've enrolled at engagement and participation metrics? Or are we really talking about member health, in which case we need to look years out in the future? So we're going to talk about that framework for assessing the value of clinical programs more throughout today, and that will really be a lens that we use to look at clinical programs over the coming year. Rose, next slide. Right, so just again, because it's the first meeting of the year, we'll just quickly refresh everybody's memories on the board goals, and specifically we can tie the different kinds of programs that we're going to talk about today to the board goals. So of course we have the goal we call it Shift Left in shorthand, but what we're really talking about is using new technologies and programs and member education to catch and treat disease earlier. So clearly, wellness programs, diabetes prevention programs, and care coordination programs that focus on primary care all fit within that goal. We have high quality, efficient care, but with always keeping the member first. We'll talk about how the programs fit in with that. Of course, we have this goal always with us of keeping the renewal increase to within 3.4%, which if we back up a step from the financial goal, really means managing our members' healthcare needs in addition to managing cost increases. And then to round everything out, we have a goal of really making sure we're doing an excellent job of providing education to our members and also everybody else who is supporting our members and who's related to the program, to make sure people know enough to take advantage and to use to the full extent possible the robust benefits package that we have available. And there definitely ties into all four of these today. Rose, next slide. Great. In June, we talked about a framework for SEOW that really said, okay, if we look at the history of SEOW and the types of things that we talk about in the SEOW committee, they really fall within 5 different categories. And within those 5 different functions, there's really clinical oversight, which is assessing the value, the clinical value and the financial value of a program, maybe ahead of time for the purpose of recommending to the board, should the board adopt or not adopt the program. But then there's a second piece of clinical oversight, which is, hey, once the program has been implemented, like the diabetes prevention programs on 10/1/22, our work is not over, right? We're going to follow those programs as time goes on to ensure that our, OEB and also OEB's members are getting the value out of those programs that we expected. Clinical strategy, really the SEOW committee will start digging into that in November, once the board goes through the clinical data in October. But this is, keeping an eye on OEB's actual claims experience and clinical data to identify where should we go next. And, we can see opportunities, what conditions are our members suffering from, what conditions are major cost drivers, and then also what technology is coming down the pipeline. There's no shortage of new things to consider in the healthcare world. So we always have to be asking, is this ready for prime time? Is this good enough for our OEB members? And then we'll recommend, and this will be happening in the December SEOW meeting, recommending some clinical considerations for the OEB board to think about. Rose, next slide, please. Great. So in September, we're going to focus on assessing the value of some clinical programs we have in place today. We talked about John Kessler is going to walk you through wellness program results discussion. And I do just want to emphasize discussion. We have some slides to set up a discussion, and we have some slides that prompt discussion topics. But we really are hoping that the bulk of this meeting can be you all supported by our clinical experts, talking through what you're seeing and what questions you have for our carrier partners or for Mercer and what you would like the next steps to be. And we'll have this same discussion-oriented process with diabetes prevention, behavioral health 360, and then PCP and MODA 360. And we're going to be asking some questions about short and long-term outcomes, that engagement and participation piece versus years from now, how are our health outcomes? And we'll talk about, we have some proposed metrics to get you guys started, but then we'll be having a discussion all collectively about what do we want our metrics to be once we've agreed on some outcomes. And then we'll have to talk about, the practical aspect of that, which is, are we getting the data that we need? And if not, what can we do about that? And then also with any of these programs, even the ones that are early, like diabetes prevention, that's a great time to ask the question, hey, we're early on in the program. Are we seeing anything that should be course corrected or we'd like to do slightly differently?
The only addition that I would put to this is when you looked at the wellness activities, the one that you didn't see listed there was what our approach to WW was. And we're not going to discuss that today because we have essentially a whole separate time period where we're going to be looking at WW. Kirsten, is that November or December? One of those two, I think.
Thanks for pointing that out, Tom. We have it on the November agenda.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. Here's a visual of that member journey that we were talking about, and when we have a conversation about what does it mean to us for a program to be successful? How do we define success? What are the outcomes that we're looking for? And then how do we measure the outcomes? What metrics do we need to have in place? We're really thinking about 3 stages. We're thinking about the pre-enrollment stage. How are we reaching out to our members? What modes of communication are we using? How often are we reaching out to nurture that relationship with them, build trust with them, educate them about how the program can help them, live an improved life? Once we enroll people who, are a good match for the program, we have the actual duration of the program itself, which might be several months up to a year in the case of the diabetes prevention program. And during that time, we're monitoring, hey, are our members actively engaged? Are they coming regularly or logging on regularly? Are they participating? Are they achieving health outcomes in the short term? So for diabetes prevention, that's weight loss is the key physical metric there. But then, after the member ends their intensive period with the program, there are still questions to ask. The goal of these programs is to improve member health, period, which means really forever. We're giving the member lifelong tools to use to help sustain outcomes and maybe even take the outcomes to the next level. And that requires us to be actively engaged there as well with the member post these programs or over time for a period of years to see, hey, is that true? Is that coming to pass? And that's what we mean by sustained improved health. Rose, next slide. This is just a framework that kind of organizes the same information with some suggestions just a little bit differently. We can measure when we talk about specific outcomes of programs. We have the direct healthcare related impact of specific programs. And this might be measuring things, health behaviors such as physical activity, nutrition, tobacco use, alcohol and drug use, cancer screening, and sleep. To measure improved outcomes related to those health behaviors, we would look at metrics such as BMI, blood pressure, blood sugar, cholesterol, and depression or stress metrics. But then we also have, and those are squarely within the purview of SEOW, but then we also have kind of surrounding everything else. Hi, Sharna. I know you had a question about an acronym. Look at your chat. See again what it was.
Hi, yeah, under the business KPIs, it says OHS survey, and I was trying to figure out what OHS meant.
That's great. Dr. Chuang is on as well. I'm realizing I don't know that either. Dr. Chuang, I wonder if you could tell Sharna and I OHS survey.
They would be the occupational health survey assessments.
Thank you. That helps a lot.
Welcome.
Yeah, it's a great question, Sharna, and I had an email exchange earlier this morning too that really reminded me about the importance of defining all the acronyms. So I have that as a note for Mercer too for future presentations. It's important. So we have surrounding these clinical outcomes, the health behaviors and the measurable health risks. We also have all of these other, areas of a member's life and other organizations and people who are touched by the member who we also think would benefit as well. For example, in the life and disability programs, improved member health could result in fewer disability claims, for example, fewer life insurance claims. We also have some business KPIs around productivity, turnover, absenteeism, presenteeism. Those are largely out of the scope of what we can collectively influence directly together, but it is just worthwhile, I think, to remember that they are always there. Great. Rose, next slide. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to John Kessler, and he's going to lead us through a discussion of Kaiser's wellness space grants and Moda's wellness advisors.
Good morning, all. So yes, I'll be walking through the wellness advisors and the wellness space grants. And again, our goal is really not to spend a lot of time to going through things, but really to tee things up for discussion. So that will be really our goal this morning. But as a quick reminder, the wellness advisors from MODA, there are kind of two aspects to this program. They have two wellness coordinators who work with the OEB wellness champions on a monthly basis. They provide webinars and workshops and things like that. So that's one aspect of the program. The other aspect of the Wellness Advisors program is really these grants up to $10,000 per entity that they can apply for. And what you've seen over the last couple of years, and we'll go into this a little bit more detail, about 2 to 6 grants per year, 16 over the last couple of years. And we'll kind of dive into a deeper dive into that too. Kaiser's program is really focused really just on the grant aspect. They have grants of $5,000 per school and $20,000 per district. And that's within the Kaiser service area, as you might imagine. And it's really, and both of these programs are really taking an indirect approach, really. They're trying to create a better environment for the teachers and other people at the schools, creating these spaces, these wellness and these fitness spaces for them. In terms of Kaiser, as you can see, between 21 and 26 grants per cycle. They do years. And again, we talked about that. So why do these programs? And how do these programs align with the board goals? So first of all, you have that shift left goal, and this is definitely very much in the shift left area. And then also the member education, so those are the two board goals that are met through these programs. In terms of targeted outcomes, it's really, helping promote wellness activities within the schools across the state. In terms of metrics, it's really looking at the number of entities receiving the grants, geographically where they're located, and the size of the school districts and things such as that. And in terms of sustained outcomes, really making sure that these spaces, are maintained going forward, and that there's momentum and excitement generated around these programs and these spaces over time. Any questions? Okay, next slide, please. So activity summary for MODA Wellness Advisors, and again, this is more on the grant side of the program, and so pretty much 2019 to current, there have been 16 grants and spent in terms of about 107,000. And this is really, and then you can also see what's been spent on the wellness advisors. So, and we talked about how these grants range from 2 to 6 per year. Again, the funding is about $300,000 a year, and as you can see, that has not been used up in terms of the different cycles or the different years.
And I think the dollars that we used for these came from the RSR funding. So this came out of the reserve funds for both the MODA Wellness Advisors and for the KP program, I'm pretty sure. And we can have, and this obviously before MODA was on board, so you may not know the details, but I'll have Damien and OEB staff can confirm that. So go ahead, John, and we'll just get that confirmation a little bit later.
Okay.
Tom, this is
Yeah.
Erica, and I just want to say for MODA's program, it is not RSR funds. They were credits that were given in the RFP, and so they were promised for 3 years, and we've just continued the program. So it's really just MODA funding the program at this point.
Okay, so for MODA's, it is just funding. It's coming out of your just the general, your general funds, and the KP part, I'm pretty sure, but we'll find out.
Yeah, Tom, I can jump in. This is Emmy Hershey. Cycles 1 and 2 for the wellness space grants were funded by Kaiser Permanente, and cycles 3 through 5 are funded from the RSR.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, good. So just knowing where the money's coming from is important. Thank you. Yeah,
and just to be clear, so on the MODA, that money is obviously rolling over each year, though it looks like, since they continue to fund it. So I think so Tom, thanks for jumping in. That was helpful in terms of the background. Any other questions in terms of funding? Okay, next slide, please. So here's the, in terms of the Kaiser activities summary here. As you can see, the wellness space grants. everything's done by cycle, so you can see each year is pretty much a cycle. You can see the dollars granted in the dollars provided for the grants, and then also the administrative fees. And then as part of COVID, there were some notable updates that we're highlighting. On the left-hand side, professional development options, again, things that people could do in place or doing it remotely. And then what you can also see is the some other changes around additional technical support and things like that. So I think what you see here is again, between 21 and 27 grants per cycle, and about half a $1 million spent in the various cycles.
Question from Bill.
Go ahead.
Do you know who is the typical district reach out? Is it the nurse? Is it a principal? Is it somebody in the HR benefits? Who's the typical person who reaches out for these kind of things to get information?
I think, and again, Moda and Kaiser can jump in, but my understanding in terms of the information that we've been provided with, it can be a variety of groups of people. And I think what's more exciting is really sometimes what you see is, administrators and teachers and, procurement people, all joining together to make sure the grant works. But again, if Kaiser and Moda would like to jump in.
Yeah, I can jump
hi,
in,
this is-
Bill. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Really quick. For MODA, generally what happens is our wellness advisors reach out to the entity contacts that we have that are normally at the business manager level. And so those are the people that we reach out directly to. And then they'll either be the ones who normally manage and lead the wellness efforts at the district, or if they're not the ones, then they will send us over to the people at the school district, like the wellness champions there.
But the first touch is administration for you, right?
Yeah,
yes, usually.
Yeah, and Bill, similar for Kaiser Permanente, it kind of depends on who gets the information, but it can be a wide variety of roles. Sometimes it's the superintendent, sometimes it's the principal, sometimes it's a wellness coordinator, so it can really vary.
Okay, thank you.
So again, you can kind of see the robust use of these the Kaiser Wellness Space grants over the last 4 cycles. Next slide, please. So again, what we want to do is really, use that information as a starting point to have a discussion, to encourage a discussion among the SEOW members. Is the uptake in terms of the program where we want it to be? I think that as you can see that there's different uptake between the different programs, between Kaiser and Moda. What can we learn from the current patterns of uptake that we could use to kind of make the programs more effective going forward? So, what have we learned? So are there opportunities to really think through this a little more in terms of, what has been most successful in terms of the use of these funds? Also the optimal award amount, again, the amounts sometimes are limited to $5,000. Is that enough to make a meaningful difference? If it's a wellness space in a school, and really, are there other uses of these funds that we should consider as well? Perhaps something more on site. I don't know, like maybe something like a cooking class, or a workshop or something such as that. So again, really just things to kind of spur conversation here. The other thing too that we're of course very interested in is measuring the long-term impact. And again, this is very difficult with these programs because the impact is more indirect, that you're trying to kind of create a better environment for the people working at the entities in the schools. So let me just pause there and see if people have thoughts in terms of the discussion topics.
This is Tom. When we set this up, we really didn't. This was one that was often squishy, in that we knew that there wasn't the direct link between, let's say, building a wellness space or supporting a wellness champion in an entity, and lowering the hemoglobin A1Cs of the entity's diabetics. I mean, we just knew that, and it was, and yet what came about. This came about because we wanted to do something to support the entities in their local wellness activities. What we haven't done is gone on and surveyed our entities to see really what is happening at the local level. We also realized that local intervention was where at least if there was a social impact, where it was going to need to be. An example, we were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars for Healthy Team, Healthy You, and this is to support small work groups helping each other with healthy behaviors, and this was to support the entities to provide potential some administrative support to help that local activity at a team level, and yet we never set up a measurement system to be able to find impacts. So I'm sure what MODA has, when you talk with their health wellness advisors, as we have in the past, is that they can talk about wonderful interactions that they've had with the entities. And if you talk to the Kaiser Permanente people, you'll hear how appreciative and how well used their wellness spaces, but there's no metrics around what type of impact. And we viewed it as almost chump change. This was a nice thing to do, but it was not ever focused with the idea of being able to truly understand what the long-term, that last one, defining and measuring long-term impact. Never had that in mind.
And I think
I'm
some
not sure
of those.
that, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry, John.
No, after you.
I was just going to say, and it was maybe a different era where we came up with this. We actually were cutting down on the amount of money that we were spending for wellness, where we were spending probably in the double what we've been doing recently, and again trying to find effectiveness, but then also trying to support the local entities.
And Kaiser has collected some data, and again, it's really self-reported data. It's really hard to kind of get kind of objective and hard results here. But in terms of some of the results, in terms of the perceived accomplishments, is really improved staff morale. It also, having these spaces shows that leadership at the schools prioritizes staff wellness. And really just providing the staff with access to a space for relaxation in the middle of their stressful days.
Yeah, agreed. And again, all good. The question is, and the challenge is, every time you spend $1 here, it means you're not spending the $1 there, and because it truly is becomes a zero-sum game.
Right. And I think some of the things that we were thinking about for the longer term piece is really just making sure that these spaces were being maintain. So it's not, we can imagine that space is at a premium at schools, and that you don't want, something that was turned into a relaxation space one year, turned into something else the next, just because of, the physical space needs for the school. So maybe that's one of the things that we can start looking.
Yeah, that's a good idea. In terms of how we move forward with this issue, Bob or Bill, do you have any comments or questions that you want to bring up?
Yes, Bill, that last comment was actually the point of my question earlier. The commitment to the space. As a school board member, I see spaces come and go. So if the administration and the principal are not engaged in the idea, that space is, I mean, I'm board member, that space is temporary. Every time I go into the school, I see changes all the time in these, in these areas. So that was the point of my question.
Sure. Well, that's a great one for us to request of KP to in terms of their interaction with the places where those have been. Glenn, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what you're saying about the metrics. I mean, just there's really no way, well, I would say no way, but we don't have a system for looking at the long-term impacts. The other thing too is to, I think there needs to be an analysis or just a look at for further information. What are the other options? Like I do know that, at least the schools have the OEA Choice Wellness Grants, and they're used for funding worksite wellness. So I guess it gets to that point that you were kind of making, Tom, the zero sum, if we spend money here, but in looking at what are, if someone, what are the other options out there for folks? And should we, be funding this type of thing versus funding the other programs, the more one-on-one wellness programs that we offer?
Yeah. John, have you thought about one of the things we just talked about for the KP program would be to look at whether or not the spaces were maintained. Can we ask, have you thought about what we can ask of MODA to look at in regards to their wellness advisors and the grants that they've done?
Yeah, in terms of the MODA program, I think it's to better understand, if there's a way, what can be done to increase the number of grants, since they, it's kind of, it is quite a bit behind where Kaiser is on an annual basis. So, understanding if that's an awareness thing, if it's the application process, so I think to better understand how we can improve that. Again, not looking to change the standards, because you want to maintain the standards of, on how the criteria used to approve that, but just to better understand, is it an awareness issue? What are the barriers for the entities to apply for those grants? And also understanding, now switching to the other program about the wellness advisors, are there other options for the wellness advisors to support the OEB wellness champions?
Yeah, I would be interested in understanding what almost surveying the entities to see if they have wellness advisors, because one of the talk about challenges, if an entity doesn't have a wellness advisor, that's the individual that the MODA, a wellness champion. If the entity doesn't have a wellness champion, there's the wellness advisors really don't have anybody that they then would be working with and through. So understanding that would be one of the ways that we could look at. And don't get me wrong, I'm super appreciative of the commitment that both Moda and Kaiser Permanente has made to this. This was something that didn't have to happen, and you know, it's continued to be supported. And again, I'm very appreciative of it. It's our job, though, is just to make sure that, you know, we're getting the most and the best of what we can. Dr. Chuang?
Yeah, I was going to just add, in addition to your comment, Tom, of the importance of that wellness advisor is also making sure there's the ongoing communication and garnering support from the leadership of the entity. You know, to ensure that the culture, that the support, obviously the facility and the services and programs are important, but the environment in which this is trying to be promoted, I think, is also critical to adoption, culture, permission to take advantage of these wellness services is important.
Yeah. Great. Greg,
Tom?
oh, go ahead.
So,
Robert.
All right, so I'll give a couple of observations. One is wellness spaces and wellness champions. I applaud the effort and the thought that goes into it. From a teacher's perspective in the building, they are working from bell to bell. They do have one prep period, but they're going to be in their rooms grading and calling parents that entire time. They're not available when they're teaching. There's 15 minutes on the front end and 15 minutes on the back end if the teacher is lucky. And then lunch is 30 minutes. And that's usually also spent with students. So it would have to be the most amazing wellness space or the most amazing wellness champion for anybody to do this during their workday, which is almost impossible, or to do it after the workday when everybody just wants to leave the space that grinds them down. So it's a tough one. The other piece on that is I don't think we'll ever get, you know, any good metrics on whether it's effective, because the people we reach out to get that information are the very passionate people who set the program up in the first place. And I think that's great, but it's not necessarily going to be accurate. I mean, the metric would be how many people go into the wellness space, and there's no way you can calculate that. And if you did, people would be offended by that. So I think it's going to be hard to measure. I think it's a nice gesture, always have. I'm not sure how effective either one of them are ever going to be.
Yeah. We are kind of coming to the end of the time for this one. John, do you have more things to present to us, or was this the this was the finale?
No, this is it. You know, we were just trying to get and I think that the comments are very much on target. So I think it's also figuring out longer term how we might better support the wellness activities at the entities.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone for your feedback.
Yeah, and my request for from Moda and from Kaiser Permanente is to, you know, listen to what we've talked about today. Tremendous work on your part. The question is, where do we go in the future? Is this something that can we address the issues that Robert just raised? Can we get a sense of what's happening in regards to wellness champions across the state? And how do we figure out whether or not this, you know, the money being spent in this regard should continue to be spent? And so maybe we can ask Kirsten if we can ask the entities to follow up with, you know, during over the next month or two, for us to have a conversation when we do the SEOW follow-up work. You're muted.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So those are really great questions Robert, I love the question that you raised too about, we understand our intent, and we're all collectively proponents of wellness and understand the value of wellness. But at the end of the day, if the teacher doesn't have the time to actually go into the wellness space, are we doing anything for that teacher? And it makes me think about, one of our work groups over the summer was to really talk about GLP-1 drugs, which are the new class of weight loss drugs. People might have heard the name Ozempic, and there's a lot of buzz about them in the media. And so we've been, as we do in SEOW, talking about new medical technologies and asking ourselves, are these ready for prime time? And one topic that kept coming up over and over again in that meeting is, but what is the environment that the teacher spends most of their time in? The environment is the school. And we can talk about access to weight loss drugs all day long, but we also, ideally in a perfect world, we'd also be looking at the environment that the teachers in. And to me, these conversations are directly related, and that here's the tool that we have, wellness space grants and wellness advisors. It's one tool we have to maybe try to answer that question. And I think, yes, absolutely, Tom Mercer has a lot of takeaways from this really good conversation. And one of them really, and maybe it's through the survey idea you mentioned, Tom, one of them I think is really to get at the heart of, are we reaching the people that we want to reach, or do we need to reach them differently?
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so we'll continue to work this. Again, appreciate everybody's thoughts and comments. We are ready to move on now to our discussion of diabetic prevention programs. And Kirsten, are you going to lead us off on this also?
Yeah, we're also just going to have Christy Ewing, before we get to the diabetes prevention program, talk about an aspect of coaching that came to our attention when we were looking at the pre-diabetes programs, and really became clear to us, hey, this is a worthwhile topic. We think that there's a big opportunity here, and it's the health coaching that Kaiser Permanente and Moda offer.
Great.
And so Christy Ewing is going to lead that discussion.
Great. Welcome, Christy.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for inviting me to speak about health coaching today. And so, first just noticing, so as Kirsten said, Kaiser Permanente and Moda both have health coaching in place. I will just share that health coaching, for me, I am a certified health and wellness coach, and have been doing coaching within primary care provider offices and healthcare plans for over 10 years. And health coaching is really, one of those ways that helps members move forward in their health journey. And so while we see a lot in our condition management programs and even within the PCP office, right, a member is given a recommendation and a treatment of, this is what we would like you to do. And a lot of times that member doesn't know how to make those choices and change their lifestyle in order to meet the recommendation of their provider. And so really high value coaching is helping that member in that behavior change. A lot of times it's not telling the member what to do. There are some educational components to it, but in general, it's helping that member get connected to why they want to make those changes, developing discrepancy maybe between what they're doing and what they want and what they're noticing as far as their health. And so this is definitely where health coaching meets the board goals, is again, this shift left. So moving upstream, really helping folks at different areas. So health coaching can also come in at any point in the spectrum of somebody's health journey. So it's very much a preventative. It can also, it's very much part of a chronic conditions management program. And then there is also somewhat of an education component. Again, as I said, a lot of times a coach will work alongside a registered dietitian, a primary care provider, another provider as part of a chronic management program. So there might be some education as well. But again, a lot of it is using motivational interviewing, helping that person feel confident building their self-efficacy, and really brainstorming and being open to trying new things. And when they hit a barrier, which always happens, I will say, humans, we hit barriers when we're trying to do behavior change. You have a coach alongside you that helps support and guide you in overcoming those barriers so you can continue and reach to that sustainable health outcome. So again, this, in these target outcomes, again, reaching your health and well-being goals, these skills that a lot of times we don't know. And we have this idea that if we learn something, if we're educated that our health is at a certain point, that somebody's going to take a step to change that. And that's not always the case. Again, that self-efficacy and confidence piece. And it does very much amplify the effectiveness of the program that person is taking part of, and helps them actually stay more engaged in the program over time. And so a couple of things we talked about is that's just wanting to say that, awareness of health coaching is really important. A lot of times members don't know exactly what health coaching is. So having awareness, having communication about what does a health coach actually do, and looking at how are people referred to health coaching, and what is the follow-up process for engaging folks. Additionally, really so there's a lot of efficacy that has come into coaching in the last 5 to 10 years. There is now a national board certification for health and wellness coaches, and there's also the International Coaching Federation. Those are the two really gold standard certifications for health coaching. Within those certifications, there really is, a minimum of 2 to 3 sessions for impactful health coaching is really necessary. It is not a 20-minute outbound phone call to remind somebody of taking a medication or making sure that they are following up with their PCP. That can be part of coaching, but most of the literature shows that it is really more of a session model that helps. Again, you have to have that relationship and that ongoing sessions in order to really move somebody along in their behavior change process. And you set goals, and then you follow up with your coach, and you talk about, what was your success percentage? What could you have done differently? What did you learn in this goal? And so that has a process to it. Also, some metrics we could look at is the pre and post surveys to measure the impact of coaching. So it's harder to say coaching actually impacts, I would say, somebody's A1C or their weight. It can be part of that measurement. But again, measuring somebody's confidence in exercising, the 150 minutes a week that's recommended by the American College of Sports Medicine, or how many fruits and vegetables do you get, and how confident are you in maintaining this lifestyle change after this program? Some of those types of questions are how you can really measure the impact of coaching, in addition to how many sessions and in member satisfaction with their coach. And so I'm going to pause there and just see if there's any comments or discussion on what I've just shared.
This is Tom. I think that we need to be looking, coaching is one of the elements that a lot of the interventions, one of the tools that the various interventions use. So as we go through for example, the diabetes prevention program, we should look at where health coaching is being used and the elements that you talk about, whether or not it's member driven or how much it's advocated by the health. And I think we do need to move on to the, we only have 35 minutes now for the diabetes prevention program. So I think we need to focus on those at this point. So if we can move on, it'd be, I think, important. That's right. I remember now we show so let's be looking at when we talk about the diabetes prevention program, let's look at, we'll bring the numbers up in regards to where health coaching is being used.
Great. Yeah. And I think, and really this slide is just showing one thing to keep in mind here is that you can see, if you look at healthy weight and weight management and then healthy eating, that is such a large percentage, right? So it's more than 50% of the folks that are looking at health coaching for weight management, healthy eating, which ties right into the diabetes prevention program. Next slide. And then also just this speaks to that, knowing that health coaching really in best practice is going to be multiple sessions with a coach so that somebody is really working through their behavior change process, which again is very much a part of the diabetes prevention program with the certified lifestyle educators. They have that health coaching built into the program. Next slide. And just really final is just with, as we look at some of the reporting, you can see here that there are a lot of members who qualify and who would benefit from coaching. The first couple columns are just saying, members that are being targeted. You can see the numbers there for prior quarters and for Q3, for example. If I look at the diabetes, so 526 people in Q3 targeted for health coaching for diabetes, but you can see that the members enrolled is low. So lots of opportunity there to enroll people in health coaching for diabetes and other chronic condition programs. All right, next slide. I think that's the end of our, yeah. So I think, Tom, as you said, in context with, the diabetes prevention programs and other chronic management, really talking about what is the optimal use of health coaches, how can they support greater efficacy and outcomes within those programs, and then additionally defining and measuring the outcomes.
Yeah. So the question, I think the main question that is present is what makes a health coach. We saw 3 out of the 200 of the 526 in Q3 for diabetes with MODA. 3 out of the 526 were enrolled or there was engagement. Needless to say, that intervention is not successful. The question that I have, and that we'll need to be looking at, where does the coach need to be situated? It's the issue of, is it have to be integral to the delivery system versus integral to a health plan? And I think that that is something that we can ask you and your Mercer colleagues to look at to see if there's any research around that. I know that health plans have tried to address the issue of how can we improve the health of our members. And the question that I have is, do they do that by insisting that the health systems that they work with take these best practices and integrate them, or do they build their own health coaches that are not part of the actual delivery system? So and there's other interventions that health plans do versus health systems do that I think we have to critically look at it, because the answer may be not for MODA to have health coaches, but for MODA to insist that the people who provide care to their members have health coaches integrated into their delivery system.
I think that's a great distinction, Tom.
Other comments on that from Bill, Robert, Greg?
No, I struggle with this one. it's got benefit, but it's not used, right? It's kind of like the ERP stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think, Tom, to your comment too, is that there are a lot of the chronic condition management programs do have coaching built into it because it is an important component. But again, I have found that in my experience that again, members have a hard time understanding what a health coach is and how they're going to help them. And sometimes if it sits outside of the program, there's definitely less engagement versus if it sits inside the program, then it's built into this is what you do as part of the program. And there's continuity of care, I think, between your provider, what the program outcomes are, and then that support from that health coach is working towards that outcome within the program.
Okay, well, we'll look at, as we look at the diabetes prevention programs, let us keep in the front of our mind the health coaching as a tool, and we'll look at how we're doing so far and whether or not we're actually measuring. We're looking at the efficacy of health coaching as a tool as we look at diabetes prevention programs.
One more
so
quick
onward.
comment.
Oh yeah, please.
Coaching is kind of a branding problem for me. You know, if it was advocate, like you're gonna advocate for me getting through the system and help me do that as well, and then you can coach me on the side. But if you're just coaching me, you're just gonna kind of give me information and tell me, and I still have to figure out what to do. When I had issues a long time ago, you know, I had a healthcare advocate that came to me, which is like what Moda 360 is, that walks me and gets me through the system. It's kind of a branding thing, I know, but it is kind of there.
Appropriate, very helpful comment. Okay, let's move on.
Next slide. So as we dive into the diabetes prevention, you know, again, the focus is on shifting left, and the target outcomes that we really are focused on is really the prevention, delaying of the onset of type 2 diabetes. So I would, in that context, think of shift left, but also preventing the movement to the right. So we have to start thinking about diabetes as the end result of a cardiometabolic disease process, right? So these processes are really ongoing, and there's states that we know of like prediabetes. There's risk factors like obesity that are basically on that continuum. So the importance of teaching members the skills of the health literacy, the awareness, and the self-care to start to slow down that progression and possibly even reverse the progression to type 2 diabetes is key. So the metrics that really matter kind of follow that continuum that Kirsten presented earlier, which is in the beginning, it is about, you know, outreach, awareness, and getting people to qualify as well as engage. So to your point, Tom, it's how do we maximize that to make sure that the right folks are aware, the consistency of the message, the possibility for handoff and referrals when somebody enters and connects with health coaching. We saw the large numbers that are interested in the nutrition and weight management. So how do we make sure that's optimized and connected? Obviously, the ongoing engagement is key to lead to the eventual outcomes that we care about. And the milestone outcomes are weight loss, meaningful weight loss, stated as basically 5% or more, but also the improvement in hemoglobin A1C, that progression towards diabetes that can be tracked in that biometric value. The outcomes that ultimately matter, like I said, if we think about diabetes, not at the onset of new disease, but the end result of a poor cardiometabolic process, then the prevention of type 2 diabetes is key, because with that is the development of fewer comorbidities down the stream. But we need time, because disease happens over time from the point of intervention to the outcomes that matter. So the two programs that kind of align to that is we've got Omada and Kaiser Permanente's model that's focused on peer support education. Both programs are based on a survey kind of assessment. So there's no explicit targeting. It is getting individuals in the population to basically assess, self-identify, And the hard part with pre-diagnosis is also it's not an explicit ICD code that we as physicians typically use. It's a clinical state. It's that state of glucose results that's not normal, but it's not yet fully diabetes. So, how do we tackle that when we have challenges in terms of coded data? So it's looking for assessments. Potentially, it would be tapping into EMR data where we can calculate that. So that's something that we can try to optimize as well in those instances that we can. The pre-D program is heavily aligned to the DPP model, and it's small group based, more intensive, one-on-one kind of high touch program and approach. So those are the sort of the programs that are in place currently. Next slide. So aligned with the programs are some fees at risk, or basically performance guarantees, to make sure that we're all working towards the same objectives that we spelled out earlier. The importance of enrollment, getting the right individuals aware and engaged and signing up for these programs. A portion that's tied to tracking and ensuring that people are completing and successful in that participation. And then lastly, the drive towards those outcomes that matter over time. So these are sort of longer term metrics that matter. So this is the structure that's laid out for the MODA Pre-D program. The next slide is the framework for the performance guarantees for the Kaiser Omada program. 20% distributed this way, where it's really all focused on the successful completion, and then obviously the outcomes as reflected in terms of the weight reduction, a meaningful weight loss of 5%. And I will say that's important, the number that's meaningful weight, that achieve that meaningful weight loss. And I'll reference that later on in terms of the importance of that in the metrics that we have currently. Next slide. Okay, so looking across the programs, there's some similarities, and I referenced that earlier, which is the outreach is really sort of a casting a wide net. So obviously that's important because not everybody is aware that they are in a pre-diabetic state or that they have some early signs of cardiometabolic dysregulation. But that means we need the associates, the teachers, as well as members to basically participate and take that survey so we can see that data, get them connected into the programs appropriately. Both have those challenges, but it's also the opportunity. But I think the ultimate ideal scenario is that casting the wide net, but where we have good clinical data to drive more targeted outreach would be hugely beneficial. And obviously not everyone can do that, but where we have that opportunity to tap into quantitative data to find those individuals that we are aware of, I think is important. The program differences, obviously the Pre-D is a high coach-led, high touch, as they call it, kind of a process with a structured framework that's aligned with the CDC DPP program. So it's first 6 months, the members meet weekly for an hour, and then the second 6 months, they meet monthly for 1 hour as they sort of progress towards optimal health literacy and self-care. Okay, next slide. So now we're getting to some of the data. So obviously, these programs have been in place since 2022. So these are the initial data that we have ability to capture, which is around the enrollment and engagement. Remember that the clinical outcomes tend to be over time, but these are some of the figures. The Pre-D is based on cohorts because it is coaching, one-on-one kind of a arrangement. There's these cohorts that get set up where a coach has a number of members that they support and engage and coach. So we have some numbers here. Obviously, I'll go straight to the weight, the clinical parameters. So here we see, the average weight loss over the time frame by the cohorts. And I'll use this example to make the case that the importance and value of an average is trending, but ultimately we're trying to improve individuals. So I'm a strong proponent of knowing and counting how many individuals at different points in time have achieved the meaningful weight loss. Because as you can see, if we have somebody that's losing a significant weight, this is the highest member weight loss of 30, they can sort of outweigh the rest of the cohort and skew the average weight, right? By definition, average, you're half too high, half too low. So useful for trending, but ultimately we're about improving individuals. So always like to see how many individuals we are optimizing and helping them achieve their goal. So same thing with physical activity. I think, the recommended is 150 minutes of moderate activity. So the averages help in terms of a group assessment. Hopefully it's always trending upwards, but at the end of the day, it's how many individuals are consistently at key junctures in the timeline, achieving 150 minutes at least of moderate activity
Ian?
each week. Yes.
Ian, so underweight, what you just said was, the average can get skewed. Should we be, as a metric, asking MODA to report on the percentage in the cohort that have made the 5% weight loss?
Yes, I would suggest that because we're trying to improve individuals from
right.
where they are. And given that we have different start points, so I would track it relative to their
Over
starting
time,
point.
right. No, I understand. I understand that part. The assumption is people who've been working on it since December 2022 are going to be farther along than those who started June 2023. But
Yes.
So that's a request to MODA, is to be, for their pre-D, is to add the percent, to report on the percentage of in each of these cohorts that have reached the 5%.
Yeah,
Because
and
that's
Tom,
the goal.
Yeah, and that is in our reporting for our PGs,
Okay.
because we have to report it to the CDC.
Got it.
So
Perfect. That's great.
as well.
That's super. Okay, great. You're already there. I'll shut up. Thanks.
And as time progresses, these cohorts, we should be tracking them, once beyond graduation. Obviously, the sustainability is the hard piece. Once we sort of lose some of that support, hopefully the ongoing coaching and access is available, but we want to see who can sustain this over time. And obviously, through claims, hopefully be able to track the same cohort in terms of lower prevalence of comorbidities and other conditions. Okay, next slide. So this is the enrollment participation from Kaiser's, sort of higher numbers and increasing numbers over time, starting from 10/2022 through to July 2023. So good positive trend, and again, aligned with the health coaching stats, right? So I think those are opportunities to continue to leverage, is that cross promotion, making sure that no matter what the entry point or where that entry point of that member to various health and wellness programs, that we are helping them connect the dots to services and programs that they can take advantage. Next slide. So beyond the enrollment data, when we get to some of the outcomes, again, we're seeing some time frame based information about participation over time, average weight loss, percentage achieving that 5% weight loss. So this is where we're tracking those individuals, and then also the benchmarks as provided by Kaiser Omada. So what's interesting to note is, this is what we like to see, is the sort of the skewing of that bar chart to start to move to the right? So to the left, I mean, more individuals getting to improved weight loss. What is important to note is, although the percentage is high on week 52, 50% achieve 5% weight loss, the sample size drops significantly, right? So we're down to 4 individuals, either still in the program or that we had a data for. And that I don't know explicitly if Kaiser Omada can clarify that, but Somewhere, somehow, we're losing them between mid-year and the end of the year. So I think that's important. And that's why the sustainability as a milestone is important to know. And when it is low, to assess that and understand what's the cause and how do we mitigate it. Margaret, you have a comment?
Yeah, just to chime in, I think on that 52 weeks, I think a large part of that drop off is because the program, it only launched last October for OEB. And so we haven't yet really, there are very few people who would have been able to sign up long enough to have 52 weeks. So I think and going back, and someone from Kaiser can certainly chime in and correct me on the dates, but I think what we'll see is as we get a little bit further into the future, there'll be more people that hit the 52-week mark and are then eligible to be included in that that measure.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. This is Emmy Hershey. That's correct. The program for Omada didn't launch until 10/1, so we haven't even been in that program for a full year yet.
Good to know. I forgot about that 10/20/22, even though I mentioned it earlier.
I'm amazed you got 4. How could you get 4 at 52 weeks when it's been less than 52 weeks? That's amazing. I'm kidding, because I know that the program had been around for a small degree before. But my question has to do with just the differences of the percentages enrolled with the Omada data was like 614 cumulatively enrolled. Now there was a huge jump. There was people already enrolled before this October, so there's something wonky about the numbers. But just taking these numbers, 129 for KP at week 26, there was 174 for pre-D, and mode is 3 times the size of KP. And again, it makes me wonder, is there a difference between a health plan led intervention versus a delivery system led intervention? Kirsten. Mute. You're muted.
Yeah, thanks. I forget that's a function of this. Part of it is by design, in that, the Kaiser program is this Omada platform. So, everybody could join and do the program all together. The way Moda structured their program is to have these cohorts of people who stay together so that they can develop relationships over a period of a year. And so part of it was more of a drip idea, and that they, sort of by design, had a cohort limit that they were trying to stay within and roll the program out slowly so they could refine as they go. And
Okay.
then the other part of it is just this general question of how do we reach the members that we are intending to reach, because we don't always know that someone is pre-diabetic, and they also may not know. So it's an interesting question, and Dr. Chuang will raise it shortly for us to all discuss as a group. Part of it is just simply connecting to the member and reaching the right people and helping them understand that they're the right person through these, bulk email or marketing, blasts that happen.
Yeah. Again, I think that it's the ongoing question of how do you get the strongest engagement, and it's one that I think we're going to need to continue to look at. Okay, go ahead, onward.
I think the next slide just says raising some of the discussion topics that we've started to get into, which is making sure we can find those individuals that will benefit from the group, and those that we do get the assessment and identification, how do we quickly engage them while the iron is still hot? So making sure that even in a controlled model, we have the ability to scale and accommodate those when they're interested to get them going into the program. Tracking the short term and the long term. Long term doesn't matter if we're not getting those folks engaged and participating and continuing their engagement so that they've developed those life skills, the muscle memory habits that we all need to develop, and then the tracking of the long term at multiple levels as cohorts over time. And then also lastly, the role of coaching and sustaining outcomes. Again, good data from the previous coaching session about the level of interest and the topic coverage is very high on nutrition and weight management as a primary set of topics. So again, there's how do we take advantage of that, make the connection on the front, but then also on the back end, because the muscle memory is key to long-term success of this. Open it up to the floor if there's any comments, concerns, questions about this.
This is Emmy Hershey. I just wanted to jump in kind of based on what Tom, you shared a comment, and I just wanted to share Kaiser Permanente is also doing a targeted outreach in addition to what goes through OMADA. And just to expand real quick on that, so basically OAB members are screened monthly using A1C and a handful of other criteria, and we're sending a targeted outreach to a handful of those members on a monthly basis. And in that information, in that outreach, they're getting information about the OMADA program. So I just wanted to add that as well.
So Emmy, help me understand. So if you're talking about OAB members who have had an A1C that is in that gray zone between diabetes and normal, and those are the people you're targeting, or who are you targeting?
Yeah, that's correct. Using that A1C, and we might need to follow up on this, or with more details. But yeah, you're right, Dr. Siltbo.
Okay. And so my question, Ian, was around the issue of how do we do a better job at targeting, and I think there was some recommendations around screening the adult population with A1Cs, and I don't know if those were for people who were already with BMIs greater than 30, or maybe in the overweight category, or for general. I don't remember what happened in regards to recommendations around screening the population looking for prediabetes.
I can say for MODA, what we actually do is we send an email blast out to members, and we've done a letter too, and we direct them to the CDC screening survey. And so they take the survey, and then based off of their results for the survey is how we reach out to members to invite them into the program. So the goal with that is trying, because we realize we don't know who's pre-diabetic or who's at risk for developing diabetes. So we're trying to drive them to that survey to really find that out.
Yeah, but and yet, for your large, let's say your largest 5 medical groups do know the BMIs of the majority of their members, so they could do a targeted outreach, or they could give you those names, and you could do the target, a much more powerful one of saying, hey, why don't you take this survey, versus you have a 1 in 5 chance of developing diabetes over the next 5 years because of X, Y, and Z. Please, it's the difference of a generalized, hey, this is a good idea, versus, hey, you're really at risk, and you can do something that can really make a difference.
Yeah, those are good points, Dr. Siltbo.
I'll leave it at that. So, Ian, any issue there?
I was just going to add, in addition to where we can tap into the clinical electronic medical record data. Despite me saying that as a physician, prediabetes is probably undercoded in claims, it'd be interesting to add that as a supplemental sort of way to see if anybody is not engaging in the survey. That gives us some line of sight to, hey, at least that these folks we know, but they're not thinking about it or participating in a pre-diabetes program.
Yeah, yeah, I'm fine with catching the wide net. The issue is that you then need to go on and wherever you can do targeted outreach for the people and increase the pressure to go through and start the process. Kirsten, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to the targeted outreach question for a second, because, we're having this conversation in the context of diabetes prevention, but we could theoretically have it in the context of future chronic condition programs as well. And I know, Tom, at the risk of bringing up a sensitive topic, I don't know the entire history. We were wondering about a health risk assessment or some kind of upfront way we could help members. I know there's some privacy challenges and, to work through. Maybe there's different ways of doing it now, but some sort of way to upfront help members self-identify into, and also help us identify them, but help them self-identify, at the beginning of the plan year, what kinds of, conditions might they develop or have they started to develop that they might not even know. And then we could target outreach from there.
Yeah. Yeah, just the comment around health risk assessment, I don't know how that's done outside of done well outside of the delivery system, versus it being done by health plans and the confidentiality issues that are, because confidentiality issues are fully embedded if it's within the delivery system, but it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe it's a conversation more on the provider contracting side,
that
having that be an outcome.
Yeah, that might be the I mean, it's even true for KP. I mean, KP is a delivery system, but it's also a health plan, and the health plan has to be very, very cautious about medical records. I mean, they're not able to, health plans not able to get into the electronic medical record as a health plan.
This bill,
So,
I'm not saying this is a good idea, but my company drops $100 in my HSA account if I see my primary care physician once a year.
Right. Right.
And of course we all do.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
And that's the deal on how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. The data, that if you're at risk for pre-diabetes, if you are overweight or obese as measured by BMI, and we understand for individuals there's a lot of people that fall into the category, but it's not an issue. But if you look at the data, it's around 75% of our adults are in that category. So, when 75% are at risk for something, maybe the recommendation, you get the $100 for getting a hemoglobin A1C. I don't know. It's be a kind of interesting.
FYI, Tom, that there is a national equity discussion campaign against using BMI only, and it was on NPR 2 weekends ago. They covered it in a 1 hour session. That using BMI only is a national equity discussion is wrong.
Yeah, and I understand that, it's only though from a it's helpful just to be able to trend stuff over time and to understand the we need to study more. We need to understand what you're raising. When another, well, we're running out of time. I'll shut up. There was it blew up a state quality metrics plan. The equity issues around not just BMI, but the concept of obesity. So that we need to that one is a big one for us to think through and everything. Christy, you have your hand up.
I just wanted, I know the role of coaching in here. I just wanted to say too that I know that again, the coaching, especially I've been involved with the CDC pre-diabetes program as a team member, and that the coaching aspect there too, where people are put into cohorts, are also supporting that environmental change. So what's in their environment? How can they ask for support? And kind of, again, that behavior change aspect. So I think this is a great example, I think, Tom, of what you're speaking before, where it's kind of part of a program, but it supports some of those areas, I think, within behavior change that is going to lead to that sustainable. I feel like we're really good in this country of making some behavior changes in a short term, but it's really the long-term changes that are going to have the meaningful impacts. And that's where that coach piece really comes in when it's done from a best-in-class, ethical approach.
So I do have a question for you, Christy. The one of the differences between AMADA and PRE-D was the development of a support group that continued together over time versus the AMADA, that a lot of it was one-on-one. There was some group, but it wasn't one where it didn't sound as again, the development of a true support group. Is there data that tells us which one is more effective?
I guess I can't quote literature off the top of my head about it. I would say I know the CDC DPP program has a lot of data behind it. And a lot of that data does come from the cohorts and the coaching component, because that is who's delivering the, you have to show up, for the 1 hour. And in the two cohorts that I've been involved in a health system that did the CDC DPP program, that was our survey's respondents' number one positives, is they felt not alone, and they felt that they had the support and understanding and just insight from other people doing things to advance their health and learn how to cook or how to get out and act, be active. So that was a really big feedback. But I can take that as a way to look for some data.
Yeah. And then getting back to Robert's previous comment, how in hell does a teacher who's leaving for work at 7 a.m. and getting home at 6:30 go to an hour class?
Exactly, especially when it might coincide with their kid's softball team game or, the other priorities. So it's a complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Okay, we're running out of, we're actually a couple of minutes past our break time. Are there any other points that committee members would like to make or questions that they want to raise? If there are questions, we're going to need to take those offline. But in terms of comments, anybody want to raise anything? Okay. Well, again, wonderful, very thorough presentation. I love the way that Mercer is outlining each of the topics in terms of starting with the board goals, talking about targeted outcomes, and then looking at the metrics that we have. I think this will be a process that we will use in all of our work to be able to move forward in this kind of a structured way, I think it will help us a lot. So with that, again, thank you for all the presenters to date and for, I think, a very lively conversation. Anybody no other comment? We'll take a break for 10 minutes. I have 10:34. We'll start at 10:44. Yeah. I thought you'd be right at my door. Okay. I have it at 10:44. Are we ready to restart? Kirsten, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. I was just watching. I saw thumbs
Great.
up from Bill and
Okay, super.
okay.
And I wanted to welcome Enrique. Thank you for joining us, Enrique.
Thank you, Chair. I was listening earlier on the pre-diabetic and the schools programs.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on board. Okay, so what I would like to do now is we're going to restart, and we're only 5 minutes delayed, so I think we're in great shape for the next conversation. We are going to be talking about the results of various care, coordination, and support systems that MODA has. And Kirsten, you're going to take us through this. We're going to be talking about MODA 360, PCP 360, a coordinated care model, and behavioral health 360.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm going to facilitate the conversations, and then Christy Ewing and Dr. Chuang are going to jump in with their clinical perspectives. And, we'll just even talk for a minute at a high level about these programs. And, both Kaiser Permanente and MODA Health were great partners in helping Mercer prepare for all of the presentations today. There are a lot of details to these programs, and I've done my best to hold them all in my brain for this meeting. But Erica and team, you can please jump in and correct me if I miss one or somebody asks a question I don't know. We are talking about Behavioral Health 360, PCP 360, and MODA 360 today, along with the wellness programs, because it really fits in with this conversation about what are we doing to make our members healthier. And the wellness programs, maybe they fit more along the shift left board goal, and we try to prevent disease or catch it early, get members into programs to get them healthy. But then also we have just the general MODA population as well. And some people are currently living with chronic conditions, or, despite enrollment in a wellness program, will develop a chronic condition. And for people who are using the healthcare system, we want to serve them also. And our goal with them is a little bit different. And those really touch on some different board goals. One of them is, for people who are in the system, either getting chronic condition care with a specialist or even seeing their PCP, we're interested in connecting them with a high quality, efficient provider and ensuring that the member has a top-notch member experience. And we know from the healthcare system that it's complex. And so this area of care coordination really developed to acknowledge that healthcare is complex, and that giving a member a benefit summary or a member handbook is not adequate in helping a member understand what are all of the services that are available to me, especially as we continue to add services and focus on conditions over time, and providing an extra level of support and guidance, whether it's through coaching or customer service, to really get members connected and to provide that, active education as opposed to passive information maybe a member would get going to a website. So we have Behavioral Health 360, which is a care coordination program through MODA focused on behavioral health, and it's relatively new. We also have this group of things kind of go together, the PCP 360, which is basically enhanced primary care. And it's all rolled up under essentially a technology, and there are some other features to it, but it's an enhanced technology platform called MODA 360 that facilitates the information sharing that's required in order for MODA to be able to provide the care coordination to members. So we'll start with Behavioral Health 360, and then we'll move into the other programs. And there are a lot of details and aspects to the program, but I think if we keep coming back to the broader question, which is, how do we define success for each of these programs? And what outcomes tell us if we're being successful? And how do we measure those outcomes? That's the theme for today. How do we measure those outcomes, both when a member is in the program, but then also, and we kind of ran out of time on this a little bit with the diabetes prevention, but also when a member graduates from a program, and we can talk about it with Behavioral Health 360, how do we know if outcomes are being sustained? And ideally, if they start to be not sustained, if it goes sideways a little bit, we can have an early intervention to get members back on track. So that's where we're going to go with the rest of our time today with the care coordination. So let's start with Behavioral Health 360. So, at a high level, Behavioral Health 360, it's a support service. It's a concierge that members can call into and get help finding a provider, a behavioral health provider, and specifically finding a provider who is going to give them behavioral health services in the modality that they want. And we know the COVID environment and post-COVID has made finding behavioral health care challenging. Dan Toma talked about that when he spoke on Behavioral Health 360 earlier last year. But in particular, behavioral health was the easiest specialty for providers to go virtual with. And a large number of providers have stayed virtual, which in a way is convenient for people, but also for people who prefer in-person treatment, it's made it more difficult to find care. And we know we don't want barriers to finding behavioral health care. So with the MODA Behavioral Health 360, members can call in and say, hey, help me find a provider who is providing, virtual or in-person care or has this special practice area. And the concierge will call around and find an available provider for that member. So that's part one, is connecting member with care. I think the metric there is sooner than the member otherwise would, and maybe a member would have given up altogether. And then the other feature of Behavioral Health 360 is really starting to tap into this idea of measuring outcomes. And in behavioral health care, we measure outcomes with some self-reported data on depression. That's the PHQ-9 test, but it's just a self-reported survey members take that quantifies their level of depression. And then there's also a similar self-reported survey for levels of anxiety. So we could presumably in the Behavioral Health 360 program, providers who have agreed to participate will report outcomes of those surveys to MODA so we can start to collect some initial quality and outcomes data on these providers in the behavioral health world. So that's Behavioral Health 360 in a nutshell. If we think about targeted outcomes, at a 30,000-foot level, we know that members are suffering with mental health conditions at higher rates now even than before COVID. So our highest level outcome is, hey, we want members to be able to get the behavioral health care they need. So ultimately, they feel better. And that leads to all the downstream improvements we saw on that slide related to absenteeism and presenteeism, productivity, general happiness. Also, we know behavioral health care is related to chronic conditions as well. So to some degree, there's just general improved member health. And then the other outcome is a more practical one, which is what are we seeing with those the self-reported survey outcomes, and are we seeing positive outcomes? Are they meeting targets? And we can have, talk about targets for those at some point too. Some initial ideas of metrics to think about, and these are discussion items, which is if a member is being connected with a behavioral health provider and the behavioral health champion does follow up with that member after the first therapy visit to ensure that the connection between the provider and the member was a good fit. And if not, they go back and help find a different provider. So, presumably, with the modality being the best fit for the member and also the provider being a satisfactory or good fit for the member, is that relationship between the provider and the member higher quality? And what does that mean for the number of therapy visits that that member is having with the provider for a health diagnosis? Is that something we could measure? Can we talk about treatment duration? What about medication goals by condition? And then the reported outcomes from the providers. That kind of sets us up for the discussion. Rose, next slide, please. We have some initial, the initial reporting data is kind of on that front end of the member journey, which is connecting members to providers and how long that's taken, and also some measure of access. So to date, 273 members have requested appointments through the Behavioral Health 360 Champions program. And the average number of days to appointment is 11.3. I would be interested to know for members not going through the Champions, I don't know if you know, Erica, that average appointment time. But Rose, go ahead.
Dan Toma is on. Dan, do you have an idea of the average time to appointment for not using Champion?
We don't have that information. It's really difficult to track because those are people who are accessing services typically on their own and not reporting that to us.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Thank you.
I can tell you anecdotally though, it ain't good.
Yeah, certainly we struggle with this. Our other clients are struggling with this as well. Rose, next slide. Also within the Behavioral Health 360 program, there were 2 additional behavioral health basically supplemental network provider options for members to have access to. One of them is Spring Health. Another of them was Gemini, which has a more targeted niche. But for Spring Health, here are some initial outcomes data on access, appointment completion status. We were interested to notice. Hi, Chris, yes, your question. Your hand, I'll get to you next here. 64% of the appointments were not completed. And then down below, appointment counts for members who completed at least 1 appointment. There were 430 of those, and the average number of appointments was 6. So just some initial outcomes data. Christy, did you have something to add?
Just to overall for the Behavioral Health 360 program also, I just wanted to bring 2 components to it. Is that clinically, we know also that therapeutic relationship you talked about, Kirsten, is really one of the number 1 predictors of outcomes of therapy. And so just recognizing how important that therapeutic relationship is and having that connection and connecting that member to a therapist that is going to meet their needs the first time, because it takes so much courage a lot of times to reach out and to get help. Additionally, I just wanted to bring the health equity component to it as well, is that, having the concierge who's able to do that initial assessment and then also look at the concordance of the member and their needs with the provider is another really great component of that program. It is going to help the outcomes. Additionally, Spring Health, as an additional network partner, Spring Health has great diversity among their, one of the highest I've seen as far as behavioral health providers. So they have a really robust diversity among their provider network. And they do, because Spring Health's model is very different, they have a really high reporting of demographics of their provider network as well, compared to what you might see in a more traditional network. Because they really take in the hours and the time of their providers as part of their network and guarantee that. So it's a very different model. So it meets a lot of the health equity components as well.
Thanks, Kristen. Go ahead, Ian.
And I was just going to add, equally important in these analysis is dissecting those that are not completing their follow through or their appointments. To Christy's point, some of this is a very sensitive healthcare need, and it is about finding the right individuals, either because of their ethnicity, language, or access from geography, but also potentially some of the diversity sensitive background of individuals, whether it's LGBTQ or some other topic that's that they're struggling with, is key.
I'm trying to understand this graph on the left. So that would suggest that of the almost 1,200 people who were given appointments, 64% didn't attend that that appointment. I mean, that's awful.
But they're averaging 10 days later.
Yeah, I can speak
to
to
makes
that.
Perfect sense.
Yeah. Dan
Dr.
can
Sept.
answer, I think. Yeah.
So that's of people who sign up for the Spring Health platform. And there's a number of different components to the Spring Health platform. And part of our arrangement with Spring Health is they do a broad outreach and say, hey, sign up for this. So a number of people will sign up for the platform and poke around and say, okay, that was interesting, and they'll go away. And that's what those, that's, I think, what we're seeing in those 36%.
Fine. That makes more sense. It just didn't make a sense that someone would get an appointment and then, 2 out of 3 of them wouldn't attend that first meeting. That didn't make sense. Okay, fine. Sorry for the interruption.
Dan, can I just clarify, I guess? So about 1,200 people have signed up for the Spring Health platform, which I know includes the digital cognitive behavioral therapy, and they have a lot of self-learning tools, and they have their health assessment or their assessment. But about 36% of those folks who have signed up for Spring Health have engaged with a therapist and completed an appointment. Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's right.
Thanks, Dan. Rose, let's move on to the next slide. This is some data on initial engagement with Gemini. It's a smaller member count, but we're serving a smaller population here because this is therapy targeted towards autism, Down syndrome, and speech delay, and includes behavioral health, skill development, language development, peer coaching, provided virtually to get that rural reach. So far, there have been 14 member contacts, spending an average of about 1 month on the platform. You can see mostly, and Dan, maybe you can add some context to this as well. I thought it was interesting, number of Gemini encounters by mode, that it was primarily email at this point. And I was curious to know what's transpiring over email.
Those are, I think, mostly actually people who are considering engaging with the program, but have not yet actively engaged. Our numbers are real low here for Gemini, and part of that is that they haven't done an proactive outreach yet in the way that Spring Health has. That's planned for this month, I believe. So I would expect that we'll see some increase in the numbers after that campaign.
Thanks, Dan. Definitely. We'll want to watch that. So if we go on to the next slide, Rose, here are some topics for this group to think about. If we think about, in a sense, that the behavioral health champion is a coach, and they're not providing the full level of health coaching that Christy described. So maybe it's health coaching light and understanding the member's needs, and is there a certain type of congruence the member's looking for, and then following up with the member after that first appointment to understand better, how is the connection, should we keep looking, or do you want to stick with that provider? Presumably the behavioral health members who receive therapy care through Behavioral Health 360, I think, should have improved outcomes for those reasons. So how do we think about that? It's just a general question. And then, the GAD-7 and PHQ-9, those self-reported surveys that measure anxiety and depression, they would measure outcomes in the short term. So, after the member completes that initial round of therapy with the provider, was there an improvement of symptoms? But how do we think about sustained improvements over time? And what's the role of the champion, or is it a different person, maybe a health coach? What's the role of the champion in monitoring sustained outcomes, and how would we go about even knowing if there are sustained outcomes over time? I'll just open it up to the group for discussion.
I would even step back one on your, I thought, very insightful grid when we talked about, engagement, first promotion, engagement, enrollment. I got that the Behavioral Health 360 champions, there were 273 people requesting appointments. Over what time frame was that? Was that like since 10/1/22?
Yeah, that was from 10/1 through June 30th.
Okay, so for 9 months or so. The issue is still, do we have, that's on a population of 100,000 members, 80,000 adults. If 15% of people have active mental health issues, that's 16,000 people. It's still a very, the engagement component is low enough that we can't even really figure out the rest of it yet. The fact that of the people that I think 11.3 days to appointments in our current environment's pretty darn good. So that part, I would say, success. It hasn't been going long enough to be able to look at outcomes, and particularly sustained outcomes. But the question that I still have is around engagement, because my guess is that if you looked at unique MODA members seeking behavioral health care, it'd be in the 10,000 range or 5 to 10,000 range over the last 9 months, maybe 5,000, but a lot of people. And so while the Behavioral Health 360 is the preliminary stuff looks good in terms of, and we've talked about the impact of Spring Health and Gemini. All those are good things. What we're still trying to crack is how do you get the engagement for it to be meaningful? That would be my response to this.
Yeah, and Tom, I have just a couple comments on that too. This data doesn't include the summer months, which we do know that OEB members tend to utilize more services during the summer months.
Super.
Yeah, so it'll be good to look at the whole year when it's done. We're also trying to really figure out engagement, and there's a couple things that we're doing on that. One is through MODA 360, and we launched a new member dashboard in January that's really aimed at trying to get members into the right programs and making it easy for them to do that. We also have an app launching at the end of this month too that we're hoping will help with that as well. And so we're doing a big campaign during open enrollment as we're meeting with the entities and the members during the benefit fairs, really trying to encourage them to take or to sign up and use their member dashboard so that they see those programs. We even have an incentive where we're donating $1 to a charity for everybody that that logs into their member dashboard during this open enrollment time period.
Super.
The other thing we're trying to do is figure out how to get email addresses, because we do know that a lot of members prefer email. And when we do email campaigns, those are the people who are engaging with us. So we're trying to figure out some creative ways to try and obtain as many email addresses for OEB members that we can.
Great. So the obviously the Behavioral Health 360 comes at a cost. Part of the metrics that we should be looking at is cost per appointed member, and I agree 100% with what Erica just talked about, that it's a program that's in its early development, and the summer months will be higher. So we should be tracking that so that we have a cost per, again, appointed member, and track that over time. I'm not sure what the right number should be for that, but if the program costs, $273,000, at least through the first 9 months, it's costing $1,000 per appointment. Now, my guess is that number is not going. That's not where it's going to end up, and it's going to be much lower. But part of the, as we look at clinical outcomes, we also have to look at the cost per outcome.
I think that's right, Tom. I made a note of that. I think the other thing too that this discussion is making me think about also is working with MODA over the next month to try to estimate the number of people our wish target for engagement with Behavioral Health 360. I think it's somewhere between the number of people who are having therapy appointments, because some of them will have established relationships already or will know someone. So I'm not sure we would want them to go through Behavioral Health 360, although maybe we do because of the outcomes data. It's for this group to discuss, but really arriving at what is our target for enrollment, and we can track that over time, how we're doing.
Great. Okay, we should probably move on. Any other questions or comments that people want to throw out? Okay, onward.
Great. PCP 360, CCM, and MODA 360. They're unique programs, but they all work together. So let's talk about how they all fit together again, especially because we have a lot of jargon in there as well. Within primary care providers, not all primary care providers are the same, and some primary care providers have gone through a series of steps they've completed that say, hey, yes, we do these extra things. We have a focus on behavioral health care. There are, 11 different standards that they have to meet in 6 different content areas with a focus on behavioral health. So they've gone above and beyond just opening a clinic and providing primary care. They do these extra things as well. And they've earned an enhanced certification and to be elevated PCPs. And those PCPs form this network called PCP 360. So we can just think of them as, enhanced primary care providers who are doing extra things. There's a reimbursement aspect to it as well that should theoretically align incentives for that provider, their quality incentives and financial incentives as well. For OWEB members who choose or agree to have their primary care provider be one of these elevated primary care providers, they get better benefits within their healthcare plan. And that's what the CCM refers to, coordinated care management plan. So they'll get preferential lower cost share is what it comes down to. And then MODA 360 is, it's a lot of things. It's supplemental point solutions that the members can access. But I think that the primary function of MODA 360 is to collect all of this different information on each of MODA's OEP members and house it in one technology dashboard. So when a member calls in to MODA, the MODA customer service representative who's helping that member can see more about that member. For example, oh, hey, you have some gaps in care. Oh, hey, you might be eligible for this program, or have you thought about this program? So ideally, that should as well help close some gaps and connect the dots, providing member education to the members. That would lead to better health outcomes down the road, or at least pave the way for PCP 360 to be generating better outcomes down the road. For board goals, this really touches on so many of them. When we provide high quality, efficient care, and efficient is such a vague word, maybe it's worthwhile to touch on what we mean by efficient at the moment. What we mean is, if we look at providers' quality of care that they're delivering for the cost that they charge, It's providers who are in this sweet spot of providing high value for a reasonable rate. And we call those providers efficient because they're doing their work efficiently, but they're still doing good work. And the member is having a positive experience with them. Certainly the PCP, the elevated primary care aspect of this program, is shifting left. The more screenings we do, the more we catch early, right? And then if we play advanced primary care out a few years down the road, what we always hope, this has been exceedingly difficult for the whole community to measure, but what we hope and we feel like theoretically should be true is that when we have more primary care and catch things earlier, we have improved health and lower costs down the road because we have fewer emergent visits, fewer inpatient stays, the acuity of conditions when they do emerge, so how severe they are and how costly they are to treat, is lower than otherwise would be the case. So from that perspective, these types of programs should also be helping the board meet its goal of staying under the 3.4% budget cap. And then care coordination provided through that conversation when the member, and soon there will be the app, but when the member calls customer service and talks to that OWEB customer service representative and here's information about a potential program or maybe a gap in care, that's an opportunity for one-on-one direct education with the member that can help them make better, more informed decisions about using their health plan. There are lots of target outcomes here. We've suggested 3 really high-level outcomes, which is 1, ultimately at the end of the day, we always want to improve member health. It's what we come back to over and over again. We want to increase the quality of care provided, and we want to decrease wasteful, low-quality care. Here are some suggested metrics to get us started. We could certainly, we'll talk about more as this goes on. But we have screening rates, or the number of preventive care visits, emergency department utilization. We can watch for lower incidence, that's new cases of, and prevalence is ongoing. So how many members are developing new chronic conditions or have new chronic conditions over time? Chronic condition management. So for members who might have diabetes, how are we doing at managing that? And then ultimately long-term lower costs. And we'll talk about the challenges that come with trying to measure some of these things in the next few slides. Here's just a visual of how it goes together. The PCP 360 is that elevated primary care provider. So that's the provider element here. And for members who work with these providers, they have lower cost sharing for some benefits. So that's their plan design, the coordinated care model. And then this is wrapped up with a technology solution and other support services called MODA 360. Rose, next slide. So I touched on the PCP-CH, and it's such an integral part, it might be worth just touching on this briefly. This was more for reference, that these are primary care providers who have gone above and beyond just the regular primary care provider licensing requirements. And there are 6 focus areas and 11 criteria within those areas that they have to meet, with a focus on behavioral health. So here's another endorsement for how integral behavioral health care is in the members' overall physical health, right? So we can just see, even looking at this slide, how robust the PCP 360 providers are. Rose, next slide. So let's talk about, here's some initial data from MODA, and we'll talk about the challenges with measuring long-term outcomes for these cohorts. So the coordinated care model in its current form, and I say that because there were some early iterations of the plan design in place before. You might recognize the name Summit and Synergy. But the coordinated care model now in its current form, with the PCP 360 enhanced primary care providers and the aligned incentives that they're working within, those have been in place now since 10/1/2019. And we've been working to increase enrollment in those plans over time. Members can choose those plans. They can choose a PCP 360 provider. This is important though. They can also be auto-assigned to the CCM plan if their primary care provider is one of those elevated primary care providers. So 2 things are important to note on this slide. The enrollment, this is average members, and MODA has about 100,000 total. So this is average members initially, about 69,000 members, and that's grown over the last 4 years to 76,000 members. That's kind of thing one to take away from this is by now we have the predominant chunk of MODA's enrollment in the CCM plans, I think, which is exciting. It opens more doors for us to talk about what we can measure now going forward. And then the other thing is the line says sum of average retro risk, and I'll tell you what that means. We should have put a better label for it. What we can do is look back at a member's claims data, and it's program software that does this. It looks back at a member's claims data and assigns them, basically kind of ranks them in terms of their level, their severity of illness, and it does that for everybody. And then we can say, okay, if I divide all of our members up into people who were in the coordinated care model plan with a PCP 360, what was their average health risk? And then if I look at people who were not enrolled, what's their average health risk? And that just lets us compare the 2 groups. The actual number itself is not meaningful. It's being able to compare the 2 groups. And what this slide tells us is that we have the people with higher health risk in the more highly managed plan, which is one of the initial initial metrics of success for the highly coordinated plans. And that was an improvement over the Summit and Synergy iteration. We have the people in the plans, or we're bringing the people into the plans who benefit most from care management. All right, Rose, next slide. All right, so as we start to talk about, I'm just going to look at my notes to see what comes next. Great. So we have our discussion topic slide after this one. When we think about the member journey in the coordinated care plan, some things happen in order, right? So by virtue of working with this elevated primary care provider and having the MODA 360 technology supporting, we hope that these members have higher rates of screenings, the preventive care screenings, than people not otherwise in those plans. And we actually have a process currently. Margaret and other staff members are heavily involved in that process, but we do currently collect some quality metrics from MODA on their CCM members compared to their non-CCM members. And we ask, are these members meeting the targets? And the targets are higher for CCM compared to non-CCM. And then as we were digging into this data more and having more clinical conversations about it, we're also thinking, okay, but what about, and I know MODA provided some data for this too, what about ED utilization? What about inpatient stays? What about primary care visits? And I think, what Mercer is thinking is that we'll take this individual approach that Dr. Chuang mentioned, and instead of just looking at CCM versus non-CCM each year, actually tracking the individuals over time, because we do think once we're coming down to this level of influencing the member behavior, we do want to start thinking about things at an individual level. So the people enrolling in the CCM 10-119, where should they be and where are they? The people enrolling 10-120, where should they be and where are they? And assessing improvement in some outcomes and a reduction in some other metrics over time. So Rose, if you go to the next slide, these are just some general discussion questions. I think I've probably raised them all already for us to talk about, but we can see them here. For these care coordination programs, if we agree that the definition of success is improved member health, among other things, what outcomes do we collectively want to think about defining that? And how do we think about the role of cohorts, the 10-1 19 members versus the 10-120 members? in allowing us to measure that. Is there anything that we want MODA to go back and report on differently, given their history with these members? And then again, as we've talked about today, what's the role of coaching in sustaining outcomes?
Comments?
Tell me again why cohorting the data gives us a deeper knowledge.
Yeah, sure, Bill. I think Ian's trying to come off mute, so I'll let Dr. Chuang take that one.
So one of the value with consistent and accessible primary care is, we come up with treatment and care plans that over time allow us to improve any chronic condition, so the chronic condition management, but also reduce onset of other chronic conditions. So we need time to achieve those clinical benefits. So it's the opportunity to track those cohorts across time.
So what you're saying is that the people who have been in this coordinated care model for a longer period of time should show better results by whatever outcome measures we have as compared to have been in for a shorter period of time.
That would be one dimension. The other would be those who have no engagement with CCM and are sort of in the reactive model of care, right? I get sick, I'll tell you, and then I seek care, whereas this is supposed to be more proactive, prospective.
Yeah. Other comments or questions?
I do have one question about the risk slide. Can I get confirmation from folks at MODA? Because the retrospective risk is based on claims data. For the non-CCM, there's a group of individuals that just are not healthcare service utilizers. So the absence of data sometimes gets falsely averaged out to contribute to a lower risk score. Do we know if we've excluded those low non-users from the calculation?
I know Bill Dwyer's on the call. Bill, are you able to answer the question?
Hi. So I'm Bill Dwyer, Director of Analytics. I put together this data, and I'll just say that. So when we and this is true just in general with retrospective risk scores. So if someone doesn't have any claims, when you look back on a retrospective basis, then by the definition of that is that there was no risk for those people during that year. And so so generally speaking, we would not exclude those members from the population. So in other words, a risk score of 0 is fully appropriate for someone who didn't have any claims.
But also someone who had a risk score of 0, or someone who didn't receive care also could have been already signed up for a CCM provider. So they're there on the non-users are on both sides of the equation. It'd be interesting to see whether or not, it's a 3-to-1 ratio right now. It'd be interesting to, if it could be done easily to address this issue, is to see what the ratio is of non-users over a year's time who are part of the non-CCM versus the CCM. Enrique, you had your hand up for a time?
Yeah, I just have a question. I know in our previous meeting, we reviewed some data and we MODA partners talk about at Kaiser about preventative healthcare. And as we discussed the data again, I was just wondering if this is the ultimate goal, which I mean, it makes sense for me. I appreciate that sort of thinking, but I wonder if we're going to be doing more of a preventative healthcare push here through OEB and through the system. And if we are, I mean, my memory might be foggy, but maybe something that we should be embracing in our communications with the members and, as we move forward, because at the end of the day, it's going to save money for the organizations and help our members. And as we know, there's a shortage of providers that, I mean, we're talking about 5-8 years, progress. I was wondering if that's the thinking from both of the institutions, Kaiser and MODA. Or maybe I'm just reading it wrong, but maybe.
Yeah, I don't think you're reading it wrong. I think that if you look at the quality metrics that we have in place, a lot of them are looking exactly at that. You know, our conversations around wellness activities are looking at that, and as you know, as we've gone through all of today, when you look at that, you know, shift left, that is with the idea of trying to address that issue. But I'll give both of the plans a chance to respond. Erica, do you want to take that? And then
Sure.
Emmy, maybe you can take it for Kaiser Permanente.
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll throw it over to Dr. Popowich if he has anything else to add. But Dr. Siltapo is absolutely correct. Our performance guarantees are largely focused on preventive care. And a lot of our goal of what we're trying to do is to get members into preventive care. So our plan designs support that. Moda 360 supports that with our care reminders that our navigators have, and then also our inner dashboard. And so whenever a member is overdue on a preventive exam, if they qualify for that, that'll show up to them as well. We also, our healthcare services department does a lot of work around trying to get members to engage with preventive care. And a lot of that preventive care is tied to quality metrics, the ones that are in our contract with OEB, as well as just overall HEDIS measures. So there's a lot of work done on trying to reach out to members about preventive care. Dr. Popowich, did you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think that sums it up pretty well.
Great, thank you.
Emmy, do you want to respond for Kaiser Permanente? I don't know if you're still there. Sapari or Keith?
Yeah, hi there.
Hi,
This
Tom.
is,
Sorry, I was just coming off mute.
I'll get it, Emmy.
Okay,
Hey,
thanks.
so certainly prevention is at our core. It's what we do. Our entire system, OEB, PAB, Medicare, Medicaid, really is one large coordinated care model with the right incentives built in. Then when we keep our members healthy, it keeps the system healthy as well and more affordable. So we certainly have many layers, just like Erica said, and even more probably, given the high access to primary care and all the case management going on for various chronic conditions related to it. So certainly aiming for behavior change in the coaching. We've always offered that and we support that, and we agree the time is right to continue to educate members and make it more accessible and appealing to do that, and combining the other kind of programs that OEB members have as well. So we're definitely on the same page. Prevention is important. It's what we do. It's part of our mission. It's part of our DNA, and looking at both the reality of behavior change that does involve the social environment as well. A healthy community really helps impact health behaviors. And then sometimes coaches, care navigators can all help kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah, Bill.
So Tom, your comments kind of got me thinking here for the last couple of minutes that, you know, in the CCM MODA model, you know, we kind of adjusted the rates and everything to incent people to go over to the coordinated care model. But the numbers I'm looking at here and your comments got me thinking that, you know, if our more healthy non-engagers with the medical community are not incented and based on their CBAs wherever they work, you know, it's not a monthly payment issue for them to go ahead and see the doctor to get a primary care. What is kind of an incentive we can do to get that group into the CCM model where we have more efficient work, because it's not monthly payments, because we've already done that and this is what we got. We got 2/3 of the people in, but 1/3 of the people didn't.
Yeah. So, the great news is, as what I'm about to say, Bill Dwyer is listening and will correct anything that I got wrong. But the first round of CCM resulted in us having the incentive of being in the network that MODA wanted to be in on the premium basis, and that drove the low utilizers into the CCM process, and the high utilizers were they a significant percentage of them did not make the move. And the change that happened when Summit Synergy went away was that we made the incentive from the basis of the interactions with the healthcare system. So you had lower cost shares and lower co-pays if you were in the system that we wanted, and that drove. We've seen almost a reversal of this risk. The higher risk profile was in the non-CCM program until we made this switch, where now we have, significantly higher risk profile in the coordinated care model. So we have made, I think MODA has made huge strides by, tweaking and changing the approach. And the issue is, how do we get this next fourth of the population? I think probably the only way would be to make a requirement that if you're going to get care with OEB, you have to be in one of these in a CCM network. That goes against our goal of offering choice. And there are probably some small communities where you don't have a choice. So, that there's only non-CCM providers. So 1 out of 4 may be as good as we're going to get. I don't know. But Bill, you can, and Erica, you can comment on my rendition of history.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything you said, Tom.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like Rachel Maddow, who always asks the person, "Did I get it right?" And they all, "Oh yeah, you got it right." So thank you very much.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is that a lot of the people who are not in CCM, a lot of them are seeing a Providence provider who is not a part of the CCM, but doesn't necessarily mean they're not a high quality provider.
Got it.
And then the other thing is members who live outside of subscribers who live outside of the service area. There are no CCM providers for them to choose.
Got it. Okay. So the 1 in 4, the question that you raised is very 1 in 4 is probably actually not 1 in 4 that aren't part of what we would call, a high quality provider.
That's good. That's good to know. That makes perfect sense.
I didn't know that. So that was very helpful explanation, Erica.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do want to say that we did have some Providence providers come into the CCM in the Medford area and in the Seaside area. So it's allowed more access to CCM providers in those areas, but that's
great.
That's a reason for a big chunk.
Great.
And Tom, on your version of history, when MODA first presented this 5 years ago, I was voting often yes as many times as I could, right?
Yeah.
This was clearly the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But so and probably some of these non engagers in the medical community, when they first engage, which we know they will sooner or later, they'll switch over to CCM and say, "Oh, okay. Now that I see the numbers, I got it." Right? Yeah.
And Bill, that's a good point, because what also happens is, because we attribute members into the CCM, as soon as they see a provider and we see it, then we assign them and they get moved into the CCM. So sometimes when you have new members come onto the plan, they'll be sitting there not in CCM until they actually have a utilization.
Yeah, that's true. And that's just the reality of it, is that there's some membership churn, and there are some people that, they're going to leave the plan before we ever get a PCP visit, so we won't be able to treat them. It's true that there are some members that we know are seeing Providence, but that's not a majority of the people that we don't have in the CCM now.
Does getting a vaccine shot put you in the CCM?
Only if you have a PCP office visit. So the vaccine itself won't do it.
All right. Any other comments? Kirsten, I'm looking at the slide. So what outcomes define success? I think you had, on your previous slide, had identified that. There is the one point that we haven't touched on yet is patient/member satisfaction, and that is an outcome that over at least early on, and I'm trying to remember on the board goals whether or not there's one that touches that. Obviously, there's high quality and efficient care. The question is from the member standpoint, do they feel like they're being cared for? And if there's, I know that that's measured by health plans through CAHPS surveys. I don't think we've ever been able to get plan-specific satisfaction for our for OEB population specifically.
Tom, you're right that it is one of the OEB board goals. It's the second but equally important half of the provide high quality, efficient care, but always keeping the member first. So it's definitely part of that one. You know, I don't know the answer to that right off. I'd like to have that be a takeaway unless anybody else from the Mercer team wants to comment on that. But yeah, absolutely, hugely important.
Yeah. Okay, and yes, Bill.
Sorry, interrupting again. I'm back
You're not
on
interrupting.
my issue with coaches. The role of the coach is what I'm just trying to state from my understanding as well as member understanding. So is the coach's role, primary goal, to guide you in your goal of what you're trying to achieve, or is the role of the coach to adjust or comprehend your goals and then help you achieve it?
You know, Bill, I was thinking, this is Christy. I was thinking back to, I think earlier in our discussion, somebody kind of talked about advocate versus a coach.
Yeah, that was me.
And
that
so,
was Bill.
okay. Oh, wonderful. So to me, so an advocate, right, is somebody who's going to help, I think, navigate the health system and is going to help you make, you know, in your decision making as far as where do I go next for care? Who do I reach out to? How do I advocate for myself with my provider? Some of those things is where an advocate is going to know your benefit options and help guide you in that way. A coach is more individually focused and helping you, first of all, design what your goals are. What are you working towards? Which a lot of times, of course, is going to include what your provider has recommended as your treatment plan. And then is going to help design what those steps are for you to reach those goals and really help you overcome those barriers, because people always are going to they're going to have barriers in obtaining their goals.
See, for me,
So it is.
I'm
It's
more
more
interested in the advocate definition
the
than
advocate.
the coach definition, right? You know, when a medical situation hits me, be it me or a kid or my spouse, you know, take something large, cancer, right? I need an advocate. I already know what the goal is, right? I need somebody who's going to advocate for me and tell me how to get through the situation help me get through that situation, right? Or a kid that's diagnosed with a chronic illness. I don't need somebody to talk with me, to, you know, be my personal life coach. I need somebody who's going to work with me to get through the system and help me do that. That's why I shy away from coach, is that it's like, I don't need a coach, right?
Yeah, and I think, Bill, there's different levels of support. There's the level of the navigator, which helps a member navigate through like things like finding a provider, if they have issues with the bill, billing from providers, PAs. So those are people who are just kind of needing some assistance with things. We also have an advocate, and an advocate is actually part of our C3 program, and we'll refer members into that program when they have more of an issue like what you're describing. and then they need help kind of navigating through the system with one of those bigger health issues that comes up. We also have, our case managers, which are reaching out for members who are, getting discharged from a hospital or needing some assistance in that realm right there. And then you also have health coaching, which I know Mercer has done a good job describing kind of what that role is, but it's more of helping members set goals and become more empowered to be able to help them reach their health goals. So there's lots of different levels and different ways that MODA will intervene with members when they need help with that.
That's kind of where my definitions were falling into place, exactly that. And I'm struggling with what the coach is.
I think we can,
need, right?
Yeah, I think the answer is that it's much bigger than a coach. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Erica, too. I think, health coaching is the job description, but the need that we're trying to fill, maybe it's more helpful if we focus on that need, which is, in preparing for this presentation, Christy Ewing shared the statistic that 90% of people who go through some kind of weight management program and lose weight gain it immediately back. 90% wind up gaining it back. So that really, accelerated our thinking and put some urgency around this question of, how do we help members once they graduate from these programs? So there's this role of supporting the member when they go through a program. And that might be, if we take our teacher who works from bell to bell and has no opportunity throughout the day, and her doctor has said, hey, you need to drink more water. And the teacher is like, when? How do I do that? Like, I want to, I really want to, but I can't, I don't know how. The role of the coach is to help that member actually come up with practical steps for making that change throughout the day. And that's a very small example, right? But then we also have this need, and it doesn't have to be the health coach. I'm not sure who else it is or what else it is. So we talk about that. But there's also this need once somebody graduates from a program, like, okay, congratulations, you've made it through OMADA and you've lost 7.5% of your body weight. So you are successful. And how do we protect that member and support that member over the next 6 months, 12 months, 2 years to keep that weight off? And if the statistic is, hey, 90%, which is, I feel like that's a pretty striking figure. It's an extreme example, of course. But if there's a high risk that the member is going to, for whatever reason, many reasons, eventually gain that back, to me, there's a need for additional support. And I think that's just the question, is how do we get members this additional support so they can execute on all of the tools that we're giving them, and then also continue to put into practice and work through all of the life challenges that come up. I think the teacher's environment certainly is full of them, but that's really the need.
Okay, I get it. Interesting side note corollary to this is, I think it was Novartis, the makers of Wegovy, had a report out this morning that showed that over 90% of the people who, when they get off Wegovy, gain the weight back.
Yeah, sure,
That's
because
the issue. That it's the ongoing issue, and it will, right. That's one of the things that we're actually looking at and talking about as we do the GLP-1 study of, okay, if you have people on for 18 months and then you stop, what happens? It's you don't rewire the brain. It looks like. Okay. Thank you. That was a great conversation. I have a question for Rose. Do we have any public comment?
No, we have no public comment.
Okay. I think that we will continue to bring up the issue of health coaching throughout all of the conversations. Rose, I would like you when I do the SEOW update, if you could include the slide that says SEOW supports the board, And I'll email you the ones that I would like you to do. But it's SEOW supports the board wellness and care coordination program, member journey, the health coaching in primary care, the preventing diabetes, the BH 360, and then the care management PCP 360. I'll email those, but those would be the ones that I would like to have. And Ali, are you on the phone or on the conversation?
Yes, go ahead, Tom.
I'm going to email you my cell phone. Could you call me in the next 5 minutes or so?
You bet. Will do.
Okay. Any other comments for the order or for the good of the order? Otherwise, we'll call this a September meeting closed. SEOW is not meeting in October, in that we are going to be meeting as a full board for the entire day. One of the main things that SEOW does is goes over the utilization report, and that the utilization report will be seen by the full board, which will be, I think, very instructive and helpful for obviously SEOW looks at it and dives into it. I think the whole board will learn from seeing it. So with that, if there aren't any other comments, I'll close the meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you.